Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. In this video, I will explain you what is Kubernetes network policy and how you can secure your pod. So in my Kubernetes cluster, I have multiple pods like pod A, pod B and pod C. By default, all pods can communicate with each other through the IP address. But I really wanted to protect or isolate my pod A from pod B and pod C. So basically I need to apply some rules. In Kubernetes, any outgoing traffic, let's say traffic from pod A to pod B, that is going to be a outgoing traffic from pod A. That is called egress. Any traffic that is going to come from outside pod to pod A, that is called ingress traffic. So I'm going to apply a egress traffic rule from pod A to pod B, which I'm going to I'm going to call pod B from pod A, and then I'm going to restrict accessing this pod A from pod B. So that is a second rule which I'm going to apply in this demo. And finally, I'm going to allow a traffic from pod C to pod A. That is called ingress. So let us see how am I going to do this in the Kubernetes cluster with this architecture. So this is my Kubernetes cluster. To start with, I'm going to create pod A and B just to show the communication between A and B, and later I will create pod C. Okay, let me go and create pod A and B. kubectl. I'm creating a pod A with the image nginx. Same thing I'm going to create for pod B. Okay, if you see here, pod A and B running with the corresponding IP address with the label run equal to pod A and run equal to pod B. The reason why I'm showing this now, I'll be using this label while applying a policy. So now I created pod A and pod B. As I said before, any pod that is running within the Kubernetes cluster can connect each other with the IP address. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to execute the pod A and call the IP address of pod B. Okay, so if you see here, this is going to work. And similarly, and vice versa, I'm going to execute pod B and going to call the pod A IP address, which is going to work. But as I said before, right, I really doesn't want my pod A can send the traffic to pod B, but I really don't want traffic to come from pod B to pod A. That is what we are going to do it now. Just to recap, I'm going to create a network policy from pod A to pod B, and also I'm going to restrict the connectivity from pod B to pod A. So going back to the documentation of the kubernetes.io, I'm going to copy this snippet and I will be expanding this snippet to meet my requirement. Okay, just copy this. Okay, so going back to my cluster, I'll create my file np. Okay, so basically this, when I go and run this one, it will deny all the access from pod A to pod B and pod B to pod A. Okay, so just let me give the meaningful name. It can be any name, basically test policy. Okay, and I'm going to run this one. Previously that pod A to pod B works and pod B to pod A works, so but I'm going to run this now to show you the difference. kubectl get pods. From pod A, I'm trying to call the IP address of pod B. Let me give some seconds. Previously, it used to get the output of the nginx index.html. Now it will throw an error because we applied the rule. So going back to my, so what it says, right? I'm applying this rule to all the pods, and then I'm saying that the policy type is egress, but I'm not having any rules. Whenever there is no rule and you run this such a YAML file, it will basically deny all your access. Okay, but our requirement is not that. Our requirement is to enable the traffic from pod A to pod B. Let me go and do that. So going back here, I'm going to call from pod A to pod B. That means here the pod selector is empty. I'm going to make that pod as match labels run pod A. So this is the reason why I was showing that labels earlier. My pod A label name is run equal to pod A. That's why I'm giving here. So you go back here. So run equal to pod A. This is what I gave in my YAML file. So vi. So I'm saying that I'm basically what I'm doing here. I'm saying I'm restricting my pod A. That's why I'm giving pod A. Okay. And then this traffic has to go to pod B. Let me go and expand further. Egress is a outgoing traffic. So I'm going to give it 2 here. So previously there was a connection timed out. So now I'm going to delete my previous network policy and override that. Okay, if you go and execute the same command, kubectl get, execute pod A. I'm going to give the IP address of pod B, which works. But there is one caveat, okay? But our condition is we need to restrict access from pod B to pod A. But we're going to go and try the other thing, execute IT pod B and trying to call the IP address. The expectation is that this should be restricted, right? So, but it's going to work. So that means the policy is still not accurate. So we still need to update few things in our YAML file. Basically, I need to update my YAML file to restrict connection from pod B to pod A. Let me go and modify that. So as I said before, when you create a policy type equal to egress and not defining anything, that means you are basically denying it. Okay, so what we need to do, we need to add an ingress policy, because we go back here, we have to restrict. For that, we need to use our policy type is ingress. Okay, I'm going to create another policy type called ingress. Okay, so now I'm not going to add any rule. As I said before, when the rule is empty, it will basically restrict your connection, right? So I'm not adding any rule. Simply I'm going to add the policy type, but I'm not going to add any rules. So going back, kubectl replace -f. Okay, so if we go and try to execute pod B and call pod A of IP address of pod A, it will give you the timeout this time. Okay, so we achieved what we wanted, but we are not complete yet, because we also wanted to create pod C. That pod C should allow access to pod A. Let us look into that. Okay, now I'm going to update my YAML file to enable the ingress from pod C to pod A. So I'm going to create pod C and show you how to do that. So let me go and create the pod C. Okay, so now I have the third pod got created, pod C, with a label equal to run equal to pod C. Okay, so now going back to my network policy YAML. So I'm what basically we are going to do now. Let me open. Okay, so here I'm going to enable the ingress from pod C to pod A. Right, let me do that. I'm going to add a ingress here. Ingress. So I'm going to enable, I'm going to get access from pod C to pod A. Okay, so my label is going to be pod C. So from pod C, I'm going to call pod A. That is my requirement. Okay, so let me go and kubectl execute -it. I'm going to from pod C, I'm going to call the IP address of pod A. Okay, which is going to work. But if you try from pod A to pod C, which is not going to work, kubectl execute pod A, and I'm going to call the IP address of pod C, which is not going to work. That is what we need. Okay. I hope you understand the concept of network policy to enable ingress and egress in your network policy. Okay, I wanted to show one more thing in the document. In case if your pod is going to be on the different namespace, like pod selector, there is something called namespace selector. You can even give a try calling a pod from different namespace by using that rule. So I hope you understand this video. If you like this, please like it and subscribe it. Thank you.